how have you been going about like picking and choosing which, because you've been very selective on your conference tour. Like, what's your criteria for what's going to make Daniel Mason come to a conference?
Totally. Yeah, it's a really good question. I feel like part of it has been serendipity. Honestly, to date, it's just like when the dates and everything work out. It's a lot of the same people at conferences. I find it really rejuvenating to come and like feel the energy of what's going on in the space. But I also like taking time and doing like kind of the real work between conferences. So it's a mix. I try to do like every other one or every third conference.
Last time I seen you was ETH Denver, which was honestly my favorite of all the conferences so far. Meeting the creators, meeting the builders. That was super fun. And but here we are again, back with another episode of Off the Top. I got my man Daniel Mason from Framework. Thank you so much for coming through, bro.
Of course, man.
Hell yeah, I'm excited about this. Of course, man. This is going to be a super fun episode. Just to kick it off, and I got Token in the building too. He's holding it down for his second appearance on the pod. So far, so good.
Yeah, ratings way up when Token's on.
Oh, absolutely. It's not. I'm sorry. It's not because of you. I'm sorry. But yeah. So just to kick it off, I think we work very closely together, obviously. So you know who my audience is, and just to clarify, what I think they want to know about from this conversation today is a lot about the culture of the organization. Like, who are you, who are the types of people that make up Framework? Because everyone sees the brand, everyone sees the name in all the right places, but from a talent perspective, I think at the end of the day, people connect to people more than anything. So we're going to get into Framework Ventures, we're going to get into the investment thesis and the market conditions and everything like that. But first, like, I would love to do the Daniel Mason origin story, man. I know you've been a founder and investor for some time, so why don't you walk me through it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm relatively new to venture investing. I started about 6 months ago at Framework. Prior to that, I was predominantly a founder for the last 10 years. So I founded a bunch of different businesses, most recently a company called Spring Labs, where it was a semi-crypto company, part fintech, part crypto. We built basically data privacy infrastructure. So if you think of like if you're going to rebuild a credit bureau in the 21st century with data privacy and consumer centricity at the core of it, that's what we built. So exchanging identity information, fraud information, all kinds of information among our clients, which are large banks and lenders. So joined there, or started the company kind of late 2017, early 2018, scaled it up to about 50 people. We raised $68 million across 3 different fundraising rounds. Wow. It was an incredible journey. And before that, I'd worked in kind of fintech and payments. I worked for a company called Belly that did the kind of like in-store loyalty and payments for merchants. I founded a company called Sabbatical in Puerto Rico. That was like
sounds cool.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was like basically like a living and working spaces where people could travel. It was kind of like what everyone did during COVID, but ahead of its time. And I founded a crypto company called Elemetric back in 2017. We were working on data oracle solutions, like in the very early Ethereum ecosystem.
Very cool, man. Very cool. So you've had some interesting experiences. You've learned a lot in the road to get to Framework that you're in today. So tell me about some of the lessons you've learned and what you're applying today in your new job at Framework.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll start with a funny lesson I learned. I don't know if it was even a lesson, but the company I mentioned in Puerto Rico was definitely my biggest fail of starting a company. We one of our early groups of tours to our space in Puerto Rico, it was when Zika virus was a thing, and we had a bunch of people get Zika virus on one of our trips.
That's amazing.
Which was not an ideal.
So the sabbatical lasted a little longer.
Not an ideal circumstance for a fledgling business trying to build popularity.
Oh my God.
So yeah, no, lots of learning experiences. No, I mean I feel like learning experiences along the way. And at Framework specifically, I work with a lot of founders on these. So Framework's a fund, right? So we're not building products in the same way that some of my prior companies have built products, but we help founders with the building of products. And that's a lot of what I do there, running the platform team. I mean, I think lessons learned, it comes down to tenacity. If you have money and you have great people, you can always build a business. Sometimes you don't get it right the first time, but there's always things to try. And you want to try things, you want to fail quickly, and you want to reinvent the business and figure out what those things are. Because something's going to work, if you're passionate about it, if you're working in the right space, like you're going to make it work eventually. It's just about learning those lessons early.
Where do you find like the confidence in yourself to bounce back from big L's like the sabbatical, everyone catching the Zika virus? Like a lot of people, that would be the end. They take a job and it's over. Like where do you find that confidence to bounce back and start something new again?
Yeah, I think it just comes down to like personal mindset. I think if you're someone who likes owning things, likes owning functions, likes, being able to really experiment and like try new things, like that's what gets me out of bed in the morning, is basically like this feeling that, you can make a difference, you can help, you can enact real change in things. And I don't know, I feel like there's just no other way, at least for me personally. I think it's more of like a personal mindset thing than anything else.
Well, you're making the segue very easy into the framework culture and what the framework thesis is about. And, I just think the people that I've met in the framework organization all have that mission very, very much in common. And we'll get into that a little bit more. But so you were at Spring Labs and then you moved into framework. How did that transition happen? Did Michael and Vance invest in you before, or how did you know them?
No, so it's interesting. So we did raise money from a lot of crypto-centric funds. Like Spring Labs raised from Multicoin and Jump Capital and Galaxy and like a lot of the big funds in this space.
Cool.
But we actually never spoke with Framework during kind of the founding of the company, which was funny. Yeah, I mean, I think this story was like I transitioned out of Spring Labs middle of last year after, helping build the business for 4 years, and took some time off and was doing advising work, was doing some personal investing, and was frankly just like taking it easy for a little while in between roles. And then I started getting really serious about what I wanted to do, and it became obvious that like Web3 was where I wanted to be. It was a passion of mine in 2017. We built Spring Labs using a lot of principles from the space, and I really wanted to go as into Web3 as I possibly could. So I talked to a bunch of different funds in the space, heard their thesis, met the team, talked about like what positions they were hiring for. And immediately upon meeting Michael, Vance, Roy, and like the team at Framework, like it just clicked. Like I was like, these guys get it.
Yeah.
These guys are as deep in the space as you can possibly be. And if there's like one team I met that I wanted to bet on for the next few years, that was Framework. So I was sold like pretty immediately upon meeting them.
Facts. I feel the same way. Now we joke. I tell you this joke within the Up Top team. When I meet a new VC and I find like the main guy, the main point of contact that I'm going to work with, we say that's the Daniel Mason of insert VC name, right? So I know you're the head of platform is your title, but maybe you could clarify exactly what is your job. What do you do? I know that your job is a supporting role to all the portfolio companies.
Yep.
You work on new investments as well.
Yep.
But I don't exactly know like the full scope of your job description.
Totally. And to clarify, I'm definitely not the main guy, right? Like Michael and Vance like founded the firm. Yeah, totally. No, and have done an amazing job like setting the culture and really like setting Framework Ventures up to be what it is today. Yeah, I got brought in to kind of do like two things. Like I almost have like two separate jobs. The one is where I'm an operating partner and I'm head of platform. And that's really leveraging like my experience of building businesses over the last 10 years to help Framework portfolio companies. So we have 100 plus portfolio companies, a whole spectrum of founders, from first time founders that have never built a business before to people that have been there, done that, sold multiple companies. Especially for younger founders, but really for anyone, there's always things that people need help with, right? And Framework's really uniquely positioned both as someone that really gets Web3, as well as somebody that just like sits at the nexus of the ecosystem to help these portfolio companies. So, Framework had always done that. It had been Michael and Vance and Joe and Brandon, and like the whole team had always just sat with founders and helped them with a lot of things. My job was really to institutionalize like that practice of how we help founders, and that's what we call platform. So we focus on really Web3 centric things. We focus on helping with tokenomics. We do delegation and governance. We help with business development. We help with hiring, of which obviously you're a huge part of. We help with anything they need. Every day is a new adventure with founders and just kind of what we're working on them with changes day to day. And then the other part of my job is investing, right? So I don't spend a ton of time like personally sourcing deals. I just happen to know a lot of founders and a lot of other investors in the space. So I think I just, by nature of knowing people, get access to a lot of deals. So yeah, I spend a good bit of time sourcing deals, closing deals, everything on behalf of the fund. And then, the bulk of the rest of the time just helping founders.
Awesome. Man, there's so many different directions we can go from that. And I have a lot that I want to touch on. But why don't we talk about the Framework investment thesis? What was it Um, in that process, when you were meeting the team and hearing how they go about their investments, what was it that caught your attention and resonated so much with you?
Yeah, and I think it's a mix of the thesis and then the culture and people at the firm. So Framework has been known as like one of the quintessential early Web3 and early DeFi funds. So Framework was like a very foundational building block in funding like the early DeFi ecosystem. That's a lot of where Michael and Vance came from. That was some of the early wins the firm had, and frankly just has a huge amount of expertise in that space. But as Framework's gotten larger, it's really become like a more of a multi-thesis VC in the crypto space. Mm-hmm. So we invest in all sectors. I think we're particularly excited about a few sectors. DeFi is still something we're really excited about. It's what we know. It's kind of our bread and butter. We're really excited about infrastructure. So we're still early in crypto. There's still a lot of like the primitives, the foundational building blocks are still being built in the space today. So we want to be part of like building and funding those building blocks. And then gaming is the newest part of our thesis. So if you saw our announcements for our new fund, it's very centered around Web3 gaming. Yeah. We've made a number of gaming investments. We're really excited. Both infrastructure providers like Stardust, who I know has been on your podcast recently.
Shout out to Stardust.
Shout out to Stardust. Yeah, as well as a bunch of game studios and people that are transitioning from making Web 2 games to building Web 3 games. So we're excited about all sides of the ecosystem. And I would say those are kind of the three primary tenets of our thesis, but we're flexible and we're always looking for the next thing in crypto, the thing that can really lead to mass adoption is kind of the theme of our newest fund.
All right, I got two follow-up questions.
Yeah.
First is, of those verticals that you mentioned, which is the one that caught your personal attention first? Like, what caught you and captured you and grabbed you into the space? What was the first kind of vertical? And then the second question is going to be, across those three different verticals, there's something about the Framework culture that's very consistent in a cultural way. So I want to touch on like what are the constants, what are the consistents across those three verticals? I know those are two very separate questions.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, I'll start with the consistency across the verticals, and I think it does come down to Framework and kind of like who Framework is. I think a lot of like the learnings that we had from being in the DeFi space is you have to really understand the technology. It's really fundamentally new. You have to be really close to the metal and like understand how things are being built. And you have to be a major participant in the space, right? Like you can't really sit on the sidelines and just put checks in. Like you have to be like playing in the space, talking to builders, putting funds in the space. Like you have to be really active in the ecosystem. So I think that's like I'd say that's one of the overarching kind of cultural theses of Framework is that like we're going to work harder than anyone else and we're going to be like really in the space, right? Like there's a lot of VCs that, they'll cut checks, they'll fund things, but they don't really spend all their time in crypto. It's like a shiny object. I've heard VCs say that crypto is now an uninvestable category since the drop, which is hilarious, because that's when you should be in. Yeah, exactly. And that's all Framework's ever done. Like when we signed up to work at Framework, like we signed up for the long term in crypto. The ups and downs in DeFi, in gaming, in infrastructure, across all these things. So I think that's how we see it. Like we like to understand the technology. We like to be close to the metal. We like to be using the tech, and we like to be just like building alongside the builders in the space.
I think you said it best when you said like being an active participant versus some other VCs that I know that I've came across that seem to just throw money and walk away. So, maybe find it hard to exactly articulate how Framework's an active participant, but maybe a good question, maybe a good way to answer that question is, in your role, how do you support the portfolio companies? I know obviously, Framework makes an investment in me and my team, and we go super hard to make sure these companies are growing from a talent perspective. But I definitely see Framework really playing that supportive role. And what else comes along with that? If you invest in a company, what else are they going to receive as far as support?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's things that are more institutionalized, but like the short answer is they're going to receive whatever they need, and we're like very flexible. Like I feel like we've hired a team that just knows that you kind of have to meet builders where they are. Mm-hmm. But as far as like a specific suite of services, I mean, hiring and recruiting is definitely one we get all the time. Introductions across the ecosystem is a huge thing. So whether you need to find a smart contract audit shop, you need to find new people to test out a product you're building, you need to meet a certain other investor, you need help on the business development side, like we know a lot of people in the ecosystem. We're always willing to just open our book and like share whatever we have. And then we're building expertise in other specific areas as well. We have expertise and have someone who came on basically doing tokenomics and like token design on behalf of firms. We're building out a governance practice, which is really helpful within the space. We have a whole lot of products on the DeFi side. So for DeFi portfolio companies, whether it's providing liquidity into a protocol, whether it's helping them with the technology, whether it's looking at their smart contracts and making sure things are secure, like we just have a whole suite of experience across kind of the trading and DeFi side that are really helpful. And then we're building that out across gaming. We build that out across infrastructure. Like as we identify new needs in the space, we sort of like jump on those and just build functions to basically address.
Love it. Yeah, and DeFi, that speaks to me most specifically. I really enjoy the DeFi crowd, the DeFi projects. But let's take it back to my other question. So what slice of crypto most brought you? How did you get personally curious, personally brought into the space?
Yeah, I think what originally brought me into crypto and still a space that I find fascinating today is the infrastructure side. So I didn't go, I guess, fully through my history at the beginning of the podcast. Like out of school, so I studied math and finance in school. I worked doing like data science and product management early in my career. And my first job was at Red Hat, which is the largest open source software company in the world. Right? Like it's the kind of company that if rebuilt in a crypto-centric environment would look totally different because the monetization strategies, the way the company's structured would very likely be in like a tokenized way. It would probably be one of the larger companies in the world, right? Like Linux software runs many, almost all like servers. It's used in the back ends of stock exchanges and telecom companies and like all the biggest infrastructure providers in the world. So I think that like unique seat I had early in my career really led me to see the value of infrastructure. And the first thing, in fact, that caught my interest in crypto was data infrastructure in crypto. So the company Elemetric that I started back in 2017, we were exploring how to build data oracle solutions. Like we saw that as the missing piece of not only kind of like, I mean, I guess it wasn't called DeFi at the time, but like what would become DeFi. And, there were a lot of really large companies built in that space. And it was a really fascinating experience thinking about what infrastructure pieces were missing at that time. And there are still many pieces that are missing, right? Like crypto's still very early. It's still hard to use a lot of the technology. So at Framework, like we definitely see infrastructure as like a major investable category for the future. We've just expanded our thesis as the space has gotten more mature.
Nice. I love that because it proves again a point that I've made time and time again, which is we're all doing what we did in Web 2 differently and better in Web 3. Like that's something that I can relate to every single one of the portfolio companies on,
Yep.
And it's just, speaks to why we have such a strong sense of community here, and why even I've seen like the Framework portfolio companies all know each other and all friends.
Yep.
It's one big community, so it's a beautiful thing.
Totally.
So last question on the subject of like these different crypto verticals. So obviously market's kind of crazy right now. We're seeing a lot of volatility, a lot of tough times. Which vertical do you think is going to thrive the most through this bear market?
I think that there's different types of thriving, right? There's thriving from a product development perspective, and there's like thriving from a price movement perspective. I don't think anyone knows from a price movement perspective exactly where things will go. And in fact, in a bear market, where we're most focused is on the products, right? Like we fully believe there will be another cycle in the future that all the prices are going to go up again. But the bear markets are the best time to build, the best time to iterate on product. So that's really where we're focused on from a portfolio company perspective. I mean, if you think about the last bear market, it gave us the Alt L1 thesis. It gave us DeFi summer and the whole emergence of the DeFi space. It gave us NFTs effectively. I mean, yeah, NFTs existed prior to the bear market, but like what has become the modern like infrastructure and ecosystem for NFTs was basically invented during the last bear market. It gave us DAOs. It basically gave us all the use cases that have been the hallmark of crypto over the last 3 years. So, I mean, I think that the spaces that we're talking about that we're bought into, infrastructure, gaming, DeFi, will all continue to develop. But I also think there's going to be a lot of unexpected things. I don't think anybody knows what theses we're going to look back in 3 years and say, wow, like this is what this bear market gave us.
Right.
So like I personally am hyper focused on like the things that seem gimmicky, they seem like toys, they seem like, you know, things that you're not sure about initially, the same way NFTs felt, the same way DeFi felt back in the early days. I think those things are going to grow into kind of the theses that define crypto over the next 3 or 4 years.
Interesting. I guess follow up to that. So right now, if we're not focused on price movement, we are focused on product. It's probably a challenging thing to like measure the success of an investment if it's not based on the price. So how are you analyzing during this time when you know the price isn't going to be what it's supposed to be? How are you measuring success in these portfolio companies?
Well, I mean, that's the beautiful thing about venture capital investing versus, like liquid token investing or running a hedge fund or like any of these other types of investing businesses. We're really long-term investors by default. Like it is like sometimes, there's tokens that come, like, there are liquid token projects that we can invest in. The vast majority of our investments are in equity in early stage companies. And yeah, sometimes that changes in like where value's accrued in the future. But like what we're really investing in is like the team and the early company. And there's a really long time horizon on them building, right? There is no liquid price for, a number of months, a number of years, whatever. So like when we're really working with them and like day to day, like sitting with the team, figuring out product market fit, when they're building and shipping and iterating product, that's all happening with no public price discovery, which, is the way that venture capital investing's worked for a long time. Like crypto definitely shortened the time period of liquidity for companies in some ways, but still when you're investing at the earliest stages, which is where Framework likes to invest, you're still dealing with companies that don't have liquid public prices, and I think that's actually like a huge gift to giving them time to build.
Interesting. I'm always curious about the talent, about the people, and I know as a VC, a lot of impact goes into the talent that makes up the team.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about how you evaluate that.
Yeah, for Framework Ventures or for
Framework. When you're potentially going to invest in a new portfolio company, you have to consider the team that's in place, right? So how do you evaluate if they have the right team, and also if they have the capacity to attract better talent as they grow?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that the team is probably the most important category, right? When you're investing at the earliest stages, the product that they're pitching, their pitch deck, even the sector they're working in, like sometimes those things change. The things that never change are the people that are working on the business, right? Like the founders, the early team, like the people that are there in the early days. As far as how to evaluate, part of it's definitely qualitative. Like it's just like a feel you get for the person when you're sitting with them. But like a couple factors that I can say that stand out in the best founders that I've ever worked with, they have this ridiculous drive. Right, like I was talking earlier about a founder. I won't like blow up on the episode, but like was at a conference with him last year, 2 years ago. We're out, drinking at some party. It's 2 a.m. We wake up the next morning and turn on the TV, and he's doing a segment on like Bloomberg or something. Wow. 6 hours after, looks polished, charismatic, everything. Like that kind of motor is just like not something you can teach. It's just this like innate drive.
So nothing was going to stop him from
was going to stop him. Exactly. So it's really like the motor and the tenacity are like two huge components. You have to have a lot of confidence, right? You have to be somebody who like just believes you're going to succeed. And part of that confidence is like when things go bad and then when things are hard, you don't give up. You just keep pushing through. And the other part of that confidence is being able to build a great team, right? Like that attracts the type of people you want to work in your organization. And it can't be like a false confidence, right? It can't be that you're seeking money, that you're seeking fame. It's truly that you believe that what you're doing is going to change the world. It's going to be, a hallmark of the space for years to come. And that type of conviction and that type of confidence in what you're building, I think is what allows you to attract a great team.
That's awesome to hear, man, because I think that humbly speaking, I think I definitely fit the mold of someone who has that energy and that passion. But from my perspective, I got to say that it was here before I met Framework Ventures, and then when you guys, put that battery in my back and that support behind me, it went crazy, bro. And now I have a whole team of people who are down for the same cause, and we're, doing 5 times the amount of output that I thought we could do in the beginning. And it's pretty exciting when you have someone with that passion, that energy, and then they get that support from someone who sees the vision. You know what I mean? And that allows for amazing things to happen. And yeah, man, if I haven't said it enough, bro, I'm super grateful for the Framework team and the support, man. It's been so fun working with you guys.
Of course, man. Of course. Truly anytime. We support you because you do an incredible job for our company.
Cheers, bro.
Right?
Hell yeah. Awesome. We're touching on talent. We're touching on people. I think one thing that you and I both connect on is the sense of community and how to engage with them. So, I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned in the last year about the crypto community in general, and I realize that's a broad statement. There are sub communities within crypto, right? But the biggest lesson that I have is learning how to meet these communities in their comfort zone
Yep.
and engage with them appropriately, to where they're going to embrace you and allow you to be a part of what they're doing. So, what have you learned since being in crypto about the separate communities and how to engage with them appropriately?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like community in crypto could be an entire like podcast series in and of itself.
Yeah.
It's definitely one of the most differentiated things in the entire space, and just like how it makes it so different from what's happening in Web 2. Um, I guess some like anecdotes about community. I mean, we see community as a hugely valuable thing. Like when we're talking about what makes founders really valuable, honestly, the ability to build community in Web3 is one of those things. Like if you think about how business development works, how customer support works, how attracting and retaining developers works, how, you know, building people who want to be buyers of your token, and like building people who want to support your project. Like these are the types of things that building a really strong community, like, yeah, if you're a great founder, you have charisma, like you can do this on a micro scale, but building a community is kind of like a cheat code, right? It allows you to like lever up yourself in some ways, and like, you know, be known for something even beyond the product. Like we see some of the best communities in crypto are ones that are very reflective of the early team, and sometimes they have absolutely nothing to do with the product itself. Like we have like DeFi protocols that we've invested in that their community talks about certain types of music, or they all watch anime, or they all get together and drink whiskey at a certain time, or like, you know, whatever it is.
Cigars. That's
Yeah.
the up top community.
That's the up top community, exactly. No, but it's about making it about something like bigger than yourself, right? I think you see these things in crypto, like a lot of them are these kind of like memeable trends, and it's like in some ways what gives birth to these huge NFT communities. And there's so much stuff that looks bizarre in the space, right? Like from the outside looking in. But when you understand that, like, this is like a broader issue, but like, or not a broader issue, but just a broader like theory of mine, that we live in a world where like there has been sort of a reduction in the amount of communities people naturally experience, like whether that's like family communities, religious communities, whatever. It's like, I would say if you're going to, one way to define modern society would be like a reduction in like built-in communities for people, and you can like view society heavily through that lens. I think that like a lot of what happens online, a lot of what happens in work, a lot of what happens in your personal interests is the type of community that's like replacing these things that used to be like built-in society-wide communities.
So to that point, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but one thing that I think I've learned along the way is that the community aspect in crypto kind of originated from gaming in Web 2, because that seems to be a place where, on like to your point of reduction in IRL communities, people started to realize like there was a place to gather online and build community, and I think gaming is the pioneer of that. Is that true?
Yeah, I think gaming culture played a huge role in it. I think it's like sort of the confluence of a few different type of cultures. Like definitely like internet culture, like Reddit culture, and like all these things played a huge role in shaping it. I think gaming culture played a huge role in shaping it. Yeah, I mean, I think like the withdrawal of other communities, like I think in the census last year for the first time, more than half the country identifies as like non-religious or agnostic or something. Like it's a tremendous shift from like 50 years ago, 100 years ago.
Interesting.
Right? So those gaps are getting filled by things, and they're getting filled by, like, I would say sports is another thing, right? You look at people's love of like, you know, the New York Mets or the Los Angeles Lakers or whatever. Like that's the new Catholicism to many people, right? And I think crypto communities are filling that gap in some ways for like a lot of people. Like the fervor behind some of these NFT communities is staggering. Like it's honestly a big takeaway of being here at NFT NYC for me, seeing just how much people care about these communities, how bought in they are, how much they pay for the NFTs, like all these. It looks absurd to people on the outside, but people on the inside, it feels really natural. And it's truly a massive change, I think, that's come about in just the last few years.
Yeah. So like one thing that to me I thought was a little bit bizarre at first, that took like conditioning to get used to, was like I started to participate in the conversations on all the platforms, and everyone was calling me Sir, S-E-R. And I'm like, what the hell is GM Sir? Like, what is this? Like, I found it very weird.
Yeah.
But then I kind of started to understand the origin. Where did this Sir thing come from? Oh, it was from a crypto meme that kind of went around, and it just became like a funny thing that was like embraced by the crypto culture. And ultimately now it's like the bat signal of saying like we're speaking the same language, and that's just a unique thing that if you're not here in the space, you don't even know what that looks or feels like, because that's really not a thing in another community, right?
Totally.
Super interesting.
Totally.
Yeah, but so here's a question. So how do you how have you had to adjust in any way to engage with these people that, you know, in the learning curve you've had to understand the community? Have you had to do anything differently or make any changes to speak their language a little bit better?
Yeah, I definitely think that in getting into crypto, there are definitely changes in just like communication styles and how you get used to it, and just an appreciation for the community side of it. I mean, I'll tell you like something that was a huge like way of learning for me is I actually started a community. So like when I was in process of like figuring out what I was going to do next, like rewind like a year ago, I started a Telegram group with just a few friends. And that Telegram group kind of kept growing. People kept inviting more people. Discussion became more and more active. And it's not like it's a huge group. It's like 300 people or something. But it's been amazing to watch like the sort of organic building of a community from 3 or 4 people to this. And like some of the people in the community raised a DAO out of it that a bunch of people invested in. So they raised 170 ETH, have bought a lot of NFTs, host events. And I'm not even involved in much of this, right? It's like organically, like there will be at Consensus. I didn't go to Consensus, but yet the Telegram community had a big meetup with 50 or 60 people at Consensus. So yeah, it's been amazing to watch that, like to be a part of that, like from day one to like this current state in that community I watched grow, as well as just witness these outside communities. Like I think there's always a culture shock. Like I remember when I went from working at Red Hat, which was like, even though it was like an open source like tech company, it was fairly corporate, to working at startups, and I felt a culture shock. You know, in getting involved in crypto back in 2017 when I first got into the space, it was unique. Like, and this space was even more esoteric then than it is now. Like, I feel like getting back into it over the last year, there are definitely differences in how crypto companies are run, and I've learned a lot from just like working with our founders closely. But I feel like I've been in the culture since then. But when I first getting into the space back then, it was a whole different ball game. And I'll say that like there was definitely culture shock then. But I feel like the longer you're in it, the more natural it feels, and the weirder outsiders think you are when you try to explain things that are happening in the space.
Yeah, I just had a whole section with Ben on the last episode where we tried to explain what a degen is, and that was a whole segment in itself. But cool, man. My last question on community is, how, if you're meeting someone maybe for an investment purpose, or let's say you're interviewing someone, how can you, what's your gauge? How can you tell if they're in the community for real, or if they're trying to take something from the community and they're not really participants?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of that's qualitative, right? And there's a spectrum, right? And totally, like when people are first getting into crypto, they're more like receivers than they are givers. Like they're like learning about it, and I feel like the longer people stay in the space, the more altruistic they become. The less greed motivated they become. The bigger they become just much stronger supporters of like the crypto ethos. So I think you can tell just by talking to people, talking through their experiences. But like I love new people to the space, right?
Yeah.
Like I think I love, like, I mean, having been in it a while, I certainly receive from a lot of people that are like more OG than me, and I certainly love giving back to people who are newer in the community and like helping them figure things out. Like I feel like that's a huge ethos in the space, is just, you know, working with people, getting them up to speed on it. But yeah, as far as investing, like I don't know that you only want to invest in like like OG crypto people. I think there's a lot of benefits to people. Like I was at an event earlier today, and I was talking to people that work at Aave now, right? One of the quintessential, you know, products in the space. But these people were new to Aave, and they were coming from TikTok, they were coming from Snapchat, they were coming from like all these big like FANG Silicon Valley companies. They're really smart, right? They're going to be incredibly valuable for the ecosystem. They're not crypto degens, they're not OGs. They're like mature, like established product builders who are going to take the ecosystem to the next level. So I think it takes all types, right? It takes like the OGs who really get crypto, and it takes the new people who really get business building. And somewhere the confluence of those two things, I think, is going to give us the next 3 or 4 years of crypto.
Absolutely, dude. And that's honestly a huge part of my job and a huge part of what I've learned over the last year. And I tell this to new founders that I'm working with all the time. I say one of the biggest value adds that I think I can give you is knowing how to screen if a candidate is ready for that transition from Web 2 to Web 3.
Yep.
Because there's a million, FANG resumes going around that look really strong on paper, and you're going to interview every single one of them because they look that good. But if they are not ready, you're going to waste a ton of your time interviewing these people. Whereas if you have someone that can screen for the, not the black and white, the esoteric stuff. And from my experience, how do I do that? It's by being here at the conferences. It's by having real relationships with the people and just understanding the community and what makes them tick. Like, these organizations are very tight-knit, like, I would say, I don't know how many headcount you think is at an average portfolio company at this point, but maybe like 25, 30 headcount.
Yep.
These are very intimate groups that work closely together, and the ones that are successful are the ones that collaborate the best and build together. And if one cog on that wheel doesn't believe the vision, they're holding the entire team back,
Yep.
So,
definitely.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the cool things that I've learned over the last year or so.
Definitely.
All right, cool. So all right, let's talk about something that I really, it's not my thing. Out of all the crypto niches, I'm really not too much of an NFT guy. I know you got the Bored Ape on the profile pic. Like, tell me about your early interest in NFTs and what you've kind of learned in the space along the way.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and to be fair, I wasn't like an early NFT holder. I did not understand NFTs in like Q1 of last year. Like, I started getting into it summer of 2021. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like I just wanted to test the waters in the space. Like, I saw it becoming a bigger thing. I mean, obviously, you see the price appreciation. You see these communities develop around these NFTs. And there's a huge allure to it to me. And there were a couple of articles I think are really good on this. Packy McCormick wrote an article, I forget what it's called, on NFTs, that like when people are like, I don't get NFTs, that's what I send them. Because he's someone who's become like somewhat of an evangelist for Web3, like for Web2 type people, because he kind of like crosses the chasm there. But yeah, I started getting NFTs last summer. I would say I got like very into them in like July, August, September of last year. I had, a few, like, Mutant Apes, some of the other major collections, Doodles, or a collection I had part of. I don't buy a lot of NFTs these days. Like, I have friends who are NFT artists, and I like buying more, like, photography NFTs and, like, more, like, things where I really, like, identify with the art more than, like, straight PFPs and stuff these days. But as I mentioned, I'm a member of the DAO that came out of my Telegram group, so we invest in NFTs as a group, which is a fascinating experience, trying to get 85 people to agree on, what we should buy and what price we should buy it at. It makes you realize how far DAOs have to come to be like even remotely efficient, like organizing tools. But it's been an amazing use case. And we've bought some sweet NFTs from them. People want to have us in their communities, so we get on like whitelists and things for some projects. So it's been a really fascinating experience, like buying NFTs with friends. And there's actually a lot of joy in that, like buying with friends side. But yeah, I'm always on the lookout for like new projects. Like, I love the art, I love the culture. So yeah, I'm an NFT guy.
That's cool. I think like while I'm not like passionate about NFTs, like I'm passionate about art, and I think one day when I come to accept them fully as art, that'll be something that's really interesting to me. And I think the whole NFT as a gateway, NFT as a subscription model is interesting.
Yeah.
When it's in the right use case, Let me ask you something. Someone suggested to me that I should mint an NFT for my up top Discord, and basically kind of use it as a gateway to where, let's say, like if we go to Consensus next year and there's a party, I can negotiate with the guy who's running the party. Let's say it's a framework portfolio company like maybe Tracer or Perion, and if they were going to throw a party, we'd say, hey, any of the up top NFT holders can get entry to this party. Like, what do you think about that kind of idea?
So I love the idea of NFTs as subscription memberships. I think it's powerful. I think you definitely want to check out like the legal side of it too, because like, depending on what those NFTs are gating, I think there's like, there's ways that there's ways you would want to design it versus not design it on the legal side. And then I think the only other thing that about NFT communities that I think is a downside, and I've thought about this because like we've considered doing NFT for like the Telegram group I mentioned that I run. The reason we've never minted like a WAMI NFT, WAMI's the name of the Telegram group, was because like we like having a curation process for the people that come in, because like your community is only as good as like the sum of the members basically. And as soon as you start, like I've been a part of like these token gated communities, right, where it's a Discord or it's a Telegram, and as soon as the price starts ticking up and some of the original members sell out and are replaced with people that are buying in at higher prices, you may have a higher floor price on your NFT, but you have a lower quality of discourse in the community, you have a lower quality of person. Like, I don't think, like, imagine if Soho House or country clubs or any of these things just let in the highest bidder versus having like an admissions process, or universities. Like, would Harvard be what it is today?
It'd be a much different crowd.
It'd be a much different crowd, right?
Interesting. Yeah, someone actually, the person who suggested this idea to me, also mentioned that maybe I should use a soulbound token or something that's not transferable. But,
Totally.
But yeah, I think that's a pretty interesting concept.
Cool. We're actually working on a pseudo soulbound token project, and I won't say too much because we're going to announce it in the next few weeks for framework founders, where basically, they receive a pass, and we're going to token gate a lot of interesting materials that are only going to be available to people that we've invested in via like an NFT and token gating. So it's in the works. We'll be announcing it soon, but something we're super excited about that kind of falls along those lines.
Nice. I feel like I'm on the borderline of qualifying for that. I feel like I'm close
Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
I'll take it.
The friends and family NFT.
Cheers, bro.
Cheers.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Daniel, brother, thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for doing this. This was dope. Again, like, I've had the time of my life with the framework, and I can't wait to see, I'm so proud to be a part of this team during this market, because I know this is a time to build cultural equity. This is a time to show your stripes, and I know I'm with the right guys, so continued success, brother. Thank you.
Absolutely. Excited to build with you.
Hell yeah, let's get it.